لقد جاءكم رسول من أنفسكم عزيز عليه ما عنتم حريص عليكم بالمؤمنين رؤوف رحيم.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Sorry for the delay. We're going to continue talking about Imam Tirmidhi's Shama'il al-Muhammadiyya, and we covered the first couple chapters, first couple weeks of Ramadan, and this is going to be the last week of Ramadan, so we're going to get as much that we can get done. We're not going to finish the book though. We can continue it after Ramadan. That's not a problem, but we left last time kind of talking about the shirt of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Bab ma ja'a fi libasi Rasulillah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we have here several ahadith that talk about his favorite shirt or his favorite clothing being a long sleeve shirt. عن سلمة قالت كان أحب الثياب إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم القميص. The most beloved clothing to Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم was a qamis. And then there's a few more hadith that kind of describe how the qamis was, what it was, so on and so forth. So كان كم قميص رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الرصف. So the length of the shirt of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم was all the way to the wrist. So we know his favorite clothing was a shirt. We know it was a long shirt. He liked long sleeve shirts, and that's just from the modesty of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he wouldn't wear like a short sleeve shirt. Not that it's haram, but it's just more modest to be more covered. And we have hadith from Muawiyah bin Qurra an Abihi. He says, أتيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في رهط من مزينة لنبايعه. I came with a group of people from Muzayyana. Muzayyana was the name of a tribe. So here's a group of people from the tribe of Muzayyana coming to give bay'ah to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وأن قميصه لمطلق أو قال زر قميصه مطلق. His shirt was loose. When we came to see him, we saw that his shirt was loose or a button was loose, right? فأدخلت يدي في جيب قميصه فمسست الخاتم. Right. So he says, the person who's narrating this hadith says, I took advantage of that, the looseness of the shirt. I put my hand into the shirt and I touched the khatam. We talked about the khatam last week, which was this kind of like raised lump of flesh on the upper back of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that denoted his seal of the prophethood. He says, I put my hand, he says, the prophet's shirt was loose, so I put my hand into the looseness of the shirt, and I kind of found where the khatam was, and I touched the khatam. There's another hadith we mentioned that talks about how it had a somewhat a hairy appearance as well. So it's interesting hadith because one, this tribe that coming to give bay'ah to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they must have known about this sign. They must have heard about it and been very curious about it. And also we see that, people who meet the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the first time, especially the ones who are a little bit more like rural, kind of like Bedouin in their origin, sometimes they're less inhibited, if you will, and they'll just kind of do stuff. So we have that hadith, and again, now this shows us that the clothing of the Prophet Muhammad, aside from being long clothing, he also wore his clothing in a loose manner, right? So there's a hadith that kind of tells us this, and from Anas bin Malik, hadith from Anas bin Malik says, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خرج وهو يتكي على أسامة بن زيد. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one time he kind of left his premise while leaning on Osama bin Zayd. Osama bin Zayd must have been, close to 20 years old or so at this time. And عليه ثوب قطري قد توشح به فصلى بهم. He had a cotton thobe and it was thrown over himself quite loosely, and then he prayed with people using that. So again, another hadith that talks about the looseness of the clothing of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have another beautiful hadith here from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. And Abu Sa'id al-Khudri says, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا استجد ثوبا سماه باسمه ثم قال اللهم لك الحمد كما كسوته كسوتنيه أسألك خيره وخير ما صنع له وأعوذ بك من شره وشر ما صنع له. The Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, every time he would put on a new dress, or not dress, but every time he put on a new article of clothing, he would name it with its name. The Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم would name his articles of clothing. So if he had a belt, he might have named that. If he had a shirt, he might have named that. If he had a comb, he would name his comb. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And that's really interesting, because these aren't animate objects. And it's one thing to name an animate object, like to name a pet, right, or to name an animal or something like that. But these are inanimate objects. But the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a connection even with inanimate objects. We know that there are records of the trees saying Salamu alaikum to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are records of pebbles in his hands saying Salamu alaikum to him. There's a record or a recording of the tree stump that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to give khutbahs on, almost like gnawing or complaining for the absence of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and other things as well. We have, just in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Inna aradna al-amanata ala as-samawati wal-ard wal-jibal fa'abayna an yahmilnaha wa ashfaqna minha." We gave the trust. We offered the trust to the heavens and earth and the mountains, and they refused the trust. وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ, but mankind took it, right? This trust to kind of be stewards of the earth and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And that we'll be accountable for everything we do. Mankind took it, but the mountains refused it. So like the mountains, trees, pebbles, it's like they have this ability, this phenomenological ability to kind of communicate or talk or be in communication, but not in a way that we can detect, not in a way that we can see beyond what our physical eye can see. It's not an animate kind of like life form, but it's kind of like this, almost like this inanimate consciousness that exists, that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had the ability to tap into. So it's not too odd that he would name even his shirt, right? And have that very important connection. The other thing about naming the things around you is that, one, you're more appreciative of them. You're also more careful about how you use them. You're much less likely to throw away a shirt that you've named, right? And just want a new shirt the next week. And so the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would wear a shirt or an article of clothing until it was just completely worn out. He wasn't someone who would always want something new and new and new. And then the next part of the hadith says, when he would put it on, he would say, "Oh Allah, praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has clothed me with it." And then he would say, "Oh Allah, I ask you the good of it and the good of what it was created for, and I seek refuge in you from the evil of it and the evil of what it was created for," which means that everything that we use could have a potential good or bad usage that we need to be aware of. So the next hadith is from Anas bin Malik. He says, "كان أحب الثياب إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يلبسه الحبرة." The most beloved clothing that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would wear is the hibra, which was a striped garment that they would get from Yemen. So then another hadith, ما رأيت أحدا من الناس أحسن في حلة الحمراء من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن كانت جمته لا تضرب قريبا من منكبيه this is a hadith from Barra ibn Azib where he says, I never saw anyone more beautiful than Rasulullah sallallahu in the hullati al-humra, in the two clothing. We kind of talked about the hullati last time, but this is a two-piece clothing, one that covered your upper portion, one the lower portion, of humra, redness. And it was likely that it was stripped in red, right? Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and at that time, Barra ibn Azib says, when I saw him at that time, his hair reached the point of his earlobes, or just a little bit past it. And so we know that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his clothing was red, right? Now, there's other ahadith that prohibit full redness in one's clothing. This was likely a stripped red, right? It was likely a stripped redness in the clothing, probably similar to what was the يلبسوها الحبرة, what was similar to the hibara, which was a stripped piece of clothing from that they would get from Yemen. رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, another hadith from أبي رمثة, رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعليه بردان أخضران. He was wearing, I saw the Prophet while he was wearing two kind of like green pieces of garments, or almost like cloaks, right? Two green cloaks. So he would wear green. We know he would wear things with striped red in it. He would wear green. Another hadith from قيلة بنت مخرمة قالت رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعليه أسمال ملينين. So he was wearing, the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم was wearing two pieces of clothing, كانتا بزعفران وقد نفضته. وفي الحديث قصة هويبة. I saw the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, and he was wearing two pieces of clothing that were reddish, but had lost their hue. It's kind of like the hue of red had faded away. قال رسول الله عن أنس عن ابن عباس قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عليكم بالبياد من الثياب ليلبسوها أحياكم وكفنوا فيها موتاكم فإنها من خير ثيابكم. The Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم says, as recorded by Ibn Abbas, he says, you should wear white. You should look for white clothing, so that the living amongst you, because the living amongst you will wear white, and you will bury your dead in white, and it is the best clothing that you can have. Whiteness also kind of has a appearance of cleanness, but the reasoning is just such a simple reasoning for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is what you bury yourself in, and this is what you should wear yourself. Almost like the wearing of it gives a reminder of the burying of oneself in it. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was always looking for reminders of death, and says it's the best clothing that you can wear. And the thing about white as well is that if you're not careful about your eating habits, right, it will stain easily and it will show. And if you just wear black, maybe you can get away with some of those stains, but not white, right? And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was very careful about the way in which he would eat, and about the particular potential staining, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, keep your clothes pure, right? There's a lot that's kind of symbolic of that as well. Thiyab in the Arabic language can also mean, it can mean loyalty, it can mean heart, it can mean nafs, right? Keep your clothes pure can kind of be similar in all those senses as well. But he says, look for white when you wear clothing. And from Samrat ibn Jundub قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم البسوا البياد فإنها أطهر وأطيب. Wear white because it is better and it's more pure. وكفنوا فيها موتاكم, and bury your dead in it. So we know the Prophet then, when it comes to clothing colors, we know that he wore green. He wore clothing that might have been like a worn out red or strips of red, but not fully red. We know that he wore white. In this hadith, خرج رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم from Aisha ذات غداة وعليه مرة من شعر أسود. One time the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم went out, right, and he was wearing a long sheet of clothing with with kind of like black hair on it. It must have been from an animal of some sort. So blackness was also in the repertoire of colors of clothing of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So green, red, black, white. These are the colors that have been narrated that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would wear, and also that his clothing was loose and it was long, and that was from his modesty sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The next chapter is Bab ma ja'a fi khuffi Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What we have from the information about the khuf of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which are thick socks. The khuf are like thick socks. And from Ibn Burayda, he says, radiyallahu anhu, anna Najasi ahda li Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam khuffain aswadain sajidain. That Najasi, the king of Abyssinia at that time, gave to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam two black, really purely black, thick leather-like socks. فلبسهما ثم تودأ ومسح عليهما. So he wore these two, and he would wear. He wore these two, and he would make masah over them, and he would make a wudu doing that. So basically, when a sock is thick, and water cannot penetrate through it, and at that time they used leather socks, and it almost has to be a leather sock for that to be true and for that to be the case, then you can make masaha, you can wipe over the sock instead of wash your feet when you make wudu. The condition is that you have to have made wudu before that, having washed your feet at least once. And if you're muqim, meaning you're not traveling, you can do that for up to 5 prayers. And if you're traveling, then you can do that for up to 3 days. In another hadith, أهدى ديحة للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خفين فلبسهما. Diha, one of the Dihiyya, one of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, gave to him as a gift 2 leather socks, and he wore them. وقال إسرائيل عن جابر عن عامر وجبه فلبسهما. He also gave, another companion said, he also gave a jubba قد تخرقا لا يدري النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أذكي هما أم لا. And with this clothing, فلبسهما, he gave this jubba and 2 leather socks. And eventually he says they got worn out. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't know if they came from an animal that was madbuh properly, like Islamically, or not, right? And there's some evidence here that if you were to wear leather from an animal that, like a cow or something, even if it wasn't madbuh, even if it wasn't slaughtered in the right way, and you use that leather, then that's not going to invalidate your prayer. But there's differences of opinion about that. We don't want to go into the fiqh, but here's a hadith that kind of supports that opinion. The next chapter is Bab ma ja'a fi na'li Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What we know about the shoes of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In the shoes of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam were sandals. They were sandals. They were very simple sandals, right? These weren't Air Jordans, right? This is as simple as it gets. And we'll see that from some of these ahadith. Anas bin Malik was asked about the sandals of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. كيف كان نعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم? How were the sandals of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? قال لهما قبالان. They had 2 laces. That was it. 2 laces, right? That was the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's shoes. The most important human being ever to walk on the face of the earth walked with shoes that had 2 laces. That's it. Right? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was extremely simple. He was very, very modest in what he possessed, in what he wore, and how he displayed himself. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. كان from another hadith on Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنه قال كان لنعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قبالان مثنى شراكهما. Ibn Abbas says that he had 2 laces on his sandals, and they were intertwined with one another. And from Isa ibn Tahman, actually this hadith this is just a repeat of the other hadith. This hadith from Amr ibn Hurayth يقول رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي في نعلين مخصوفتين. I saw that the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم prayed in two sandals that were patched, right? They were interpatched. And so the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he didn't even, like, sometimes, like, if your shoe gets a little bit worn out, you might be like, let me get another pair of shoes. His shoes, when they were worn out and torn here and there, he would simply look for other material to patch up his shoes, right? And he would just keep wearing the same set of sandals, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Abu Hurairah says in the hadith, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam قال لا يمشين أحدكم في نعل واحدة لينعلهما جميعا أو ليحفهما جميعا. Don't let any one of you, the Prophet Muhammad says, don't let any one of you just walk with one pair of shoes or one sandal for him, but really one pair of shoes. Either wear two pairs of shoes or don't wear any shoes at all, right? In other words, don't display yourself as kind of with the slightest bit of distortion. He didn't like the slightest bit of distortion or the slightest bit of unnatural representation, right? And for someone just to walk with one shoe, that means that you would be off balance. And that's against the nature of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because he was an extremely balanced human being, right? And so the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ loved things that showed balance, and he didn't like things that showed imbalance. And there's emphasis in the hadith as well, because it says, لا يمشين, with nuna tawkid, right? That nuna tawkid, لا يمشين, he didn't say لا يمشي. He says لا يمشين, which is a lot of emphasis. That just goes to show the degree of emphasis to which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ appreciated and desired balance in every single aspect of life. Next hadith is from Abu Hurairah, and he says, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا انتعل أحدكم فليبدأ باليمين وإذا نزع فليبدأ بالشمال فلتكن اليمنى أولهما تنعل وآخرهما تنزع. Right? When any one of you puts his shoes on, let him begin with the right shoe. So you put your right shoe on first. And when you take off your shoes, let him begin with the left shoe. So you take your left shoe off. So that the right shoe is the first one to go on and the last one to go off. So that is from the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يحب التيمم ما استطاع في ترجله وتنعله وطهوره. In another hadith, the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم loved to start on the right, and as many things as he could. Whether he was making wudu, he would start with the right hand. If he was putting his shoes on, he would start with the right foot. If he was combing his hair, he would start on the right side of his head. And whatever he could, the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم would always start on the right. And we have this next hadith. كان لنعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قبالان وأبي بكر وعمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما. The Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم had two laces in his sandal, as did Abu Bakr and Umar. But وأول من عقد عقدا واحدا عثمان رضي الله عنه. Uthman decided he just wanted to have one lace, and that's important, because having two laces in your shoe is not necessarily from the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. It is from what the Prophet would do, but that may be more related simply to the cultural practices and what was available to him in the market at that time for those people, for that particular society. And there are many things like that. For example, his camel, or the way that he or the hibra, the particular type of clothing that he wore from Yemen. Those are articles that were unique to his time and place specifically. And maybe by the time of Uthman, the caliphate of Uthman, things changed a little bit, the style changed a little bit. Maybe Uthman went with the style because he knew that wasn't necessarily the sunnah, right? But you find other people like Abu Bakr and Umar, they also kept two laces on their shoes, just like the Prophet did, right? And the thing you have to remember is there's a difference between keeping the sunnah and keeping the memory of the right? There's a big difference. And a lot of these things that the early companions did, they were trying to keep the memory of the Prophet, not necessarily what we would see or what we would call from a Sharia perspective. This is a sunnah that you should do. There was a companion one time that walking all of a sudden ducked, right? And someone asked him about that. And I believe it was Umar radiallahu anhu who ducked. And he says, why did you just duck randomly? There's nothing here to duck from. He says, well, there was a tree here during the time of the Prophet. And I saw the Prophet duck under the tree one time as he walked under it. And that kind of like piety and that type of like, emulation of the Prophet, much of it was keeping the memory of the Prophet, right? That because he was so beloved in the hearts of the companions, they didn't want anything that took that memory away. So, so simply like repeating certain things that the Prophet did, even if it wasn't a particular religious sunnah, it helped them preserve that memory. And the shoelaces might be one of those things, right? Just like that as well. The next chapter is ما جاء في ذكر خاتم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. This is one of the more interesting chapters, and this and the next chapter, which is about the Prophet's ring and how he wore his ring. كان خاتم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Anas bin Malik says كان خاتم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من ورق وكان فصه حبشيا. The Prophet's ring was from silver, and the fus, which is like the stone or the gem that's normally inside the ring, was from Abyssinia. And Ibn Umar says, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اتخذ خاتما من فضة فكان يختم به ولا يلبسه. The Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم took a ring from silver, a silver ring, and he would yakhtum, whenever he would write a letter, he would use the ring to stamp the letter. But Ibn Umar says that he wouldn't wear the ring as a fashion statement. He wouldn't wear the ring all the time, just kind of like for fashion purposes or for, dress purposes. He would just wear it for the purpose of using it to sign letters, right? And again, it's not from the character of the Prophet Muhammad that he would be interested in making a fashion statement. So this hadith, it makes sense, right? A lot of people, they wear rings thinking that this is from the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, but it's not quite. The ring that the Prophet Muhammad wore was a functional ring. It wasn't an aesthetic ring. It wasn't a ring for like dress purposes, nor did it have any particular significance. It was simply used for the purpose of stamping, right? كان another hadith from Anas bin Malik كان خاتم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من فضة فصه منه, right? This hadith by Anas bin Malik, he says the ring of the Prophet was silver, and so was the component inside the ring that was like, the gem. It was also silver. In another hadith we read that it was that part was actually from Abyssinia. Anas bin Malik has another hadith about this where he says لما أراد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يكتب إلى العجم قيل له إن العجم لا يقبلون إلا كتابا عليه خاتم فاصطنع خاتما فكأني أنظر إلى بياضه في كفه. This is an important hadith. Anas bin Malik says that the Prophet was told when he wanted to write to non-Arabs, and towards the end of his life, the Prophet Muhammad sent letters. He sent letters to the king of Persia. He sent letters to the king of Abyssinia. He sent letters to the king of the Roman Empire, and to many different leaders and tribes who were not Arab, right? The Prophet Muhammad saw himself as مبعوث رحمة للعالمين, someone sent as a mercy for everyone, right? And he wanted to complete that message of being sent to everyone. So he sent letters, but he was told that they don't look at letters seriously unless you sign them with a stamp, right? So the Prophet Muhammad had a ring made for him that functioned as a stamp, right? And that's how we use it. As the medic says, it's like even today I could see the whiteness of it inside of his palm. Why? Because the Prophet Muhammad, you know how normally people, when they wear a ring, they wear it so that the stone or the gem is facing outside. It's facing dorsally like this, right? the Prophet had it facing ventrally. So he had the ring turned around so that the gem or the central component of the ring was in his palm. So Anas bin Malik is like, he's saying, it's like I could still see the whiteness of it in his palm, right? Because he had it turned in towards his palm. Why? Because when he wanted to stamp a letter, he would stamp it like this. If this was the letter, he would take his hands, and he would stamp it like this. As opposed to it being on the outside, which means he would have to stamp it like this, right? Now tell me, if the Prophet is a mercy for all of mankind, which one of these movements seems like a more merciful movement, right? The first one, obviously. So even in the stamping, there's a hint of mercy by the Prophet Muhammad. He would bring it in. One, he wasn't interested in making a fashion statement, but two, the way that he would stamp it like this, it was more in line with his character as a gentle human being. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Anas bin Malik has in another hadith, and again, Anas bin Malik, of course, he's going to narrate the majority of his hadith because the ring is something that the Prophet only wore when he wanted to stamp a letter, right? And the details of it were not going to be visible to normal people. Anas, being his servant and a young person, saw it quite often. كان نقش خاتم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم محمد سطر ورسول سطر والله سطر. He had on this ring, this is how he had the imprint of the ring. He had a line saying Muhammad, a line saying Rasul, and a line saying Muhammad. So it would read Muhammad Rasulullah. And when he would sign his letters, like this. When he would sign his letters like this, that's the imprint, right? Muhammad Rasulullah. So that's how the letter would be signed, Muhammad Rasulullah. Now the Prophet wouldn't write that because he was illiterate. Someone wrote that for him on the ring and chiseled it in the ring and printed it on the ring so that when he stamped the letter, that's the imprint that was left. However, it wasn't Muhammad on top, Rasul in the middle, Allah on the bottom. The Prophet Muhammad specifically wanted his ring to say Allah on top, Rasul in the middle, and Muhammad on the bottom, because he didn't want his name on top of the name of Allah, out of adab. So the ring actually read from bottom up, and it was almost, the reading was almost a inverse vertical reading of Muhammad Rasulullah, because he wanted the top portion to say Allah. He didn't want his name above the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that was from the adab of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the ring actually read Allah Rasul Muhammad. If you read it normally, it would read Allah Rasul Muhammad, right? But if you read it from the bottom up, it read Muhammad Rasulullah. And that's how he wanted it. He wanted it to be read from the bottom up so that his name would not be on top of the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there's not that much space on the the gemstone part of the ring. You only had enough for one line at a time. So it couldn't be read from left to right. It had to be bottom up or top or top to bottom. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. That's from the adab of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And from Anas bin Malik, we have another hadith. He says, "Anna Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam kataba ila Kisra wa Qaisar wa Najashi." The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he wrote to the king of Persia, he wrote to the Najashi king, he wrote to the Roman king. فَقِيلَ لَهُ إِنَّهُمْ لَا يَقْبِلُونَ كِتَابًا إِلَّا بِخَاتِمٍ فَصَاغ. He was told, just like we mentioned in another hadith, that they don't accept a letter that wasn't stamped, wasn't formally stamped. So he had one named Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam حلقته فضة ونقش فيه محمد رسول الله. So the ring was silver and he had Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam inscribed on the ring. In another hadith by عن زهري عن أنس أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان إذا دخل خلاء نزع خاتمه. Whenever the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would go and enter the bathroom, he would first take off his ring, right? If he had it on him. And that's important, right? Because the name of Allah is mentioned on the ring. And you don't want to take the name of Allah to anywhere where it's not befitting for the name of Allah to be, like a bathroom, right? And this is important because a lot of times, sometimes people nowadays, they wear articles of clothing that have, ayat written on them or something like that, or they'll wear a necklace like with ayatul kursi, or they'll wear a ring, right, with some Quranic inscription on it or something like that. If you do, or they'll have a Quran. Nowadays people have like pocket-sized Qurans. If you have any of that, you want to take it off before you go into the bathroom, right? The name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sacred, and there should be ta'zeem for the sacred, right? There should be a level of respect and importance held for what is sacred, and we shouldn't take to the bathroom anything that has the name of Allah on it, right? Or even just the word God. We shouldn't take to the bathroom anything that has the word God on it, right? So that includes other books as well, or magazines that might have that written in it, just out of respect for the sacredness of the name. Hadith by Ibn Umar in which he says, the Prophet Muhammad says, اتخذ رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خاتما من ورق. The Prophet Muhammad took a ring of silver, فكان في يدي. ثم كان في يدي أبي بكر ويدي عمر. So it was in his ring, and then when the Prophet passed away, it was passed on to Abu Bakr. So Abu Bakr had the ring in his hand, and then Umar had the ring in his hand. ثم كان في يدي عثمان حتى وقع في بئر أريس. And Uthman had it until it fell in the well of Aris. We're going to talk about another hadith that talks about that a little bit more. Aris was a well that was owned by a Jewish man in Medina, and it was named after him. So his name was Aris. The Jewish man's name was Aris, and it was a well-known well in Medina. And the servant of Uthman one day had the ring and went to go get water, and the ring fell into the well. Naqshuhu Muhammad Rasulullah. On the ring was the inscription that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Next chapter is Bab ma ja'a fi anna Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam kana yaqtatimu fi yamini. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to wear the ring in his right hand. There are several ahadith that say that very thing. And the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam kana yalbisu khatamahu fi yaminihi. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he used to wear his ring in his right hand. We have another hadith here from Nafi' an Ibn Umar that أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اتخذ خاتما من فضة وجعل فصه مما يلي كفه. The Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم took a silver ring, and he would put the fussa, which is the gemstone part of the ring, he would turn that inward so that it was ventral, it was on the palm side. ونقش فيه محمد رسول الله ونهى أن ينقش أحد عليه. He had inscribed on it that Muhammad was the messenger of Allah, but he prohibited other people from inscribing that on their rings. هو الذي سقط من معيقيب في بئر أريس. And it's the same ring that fell from Mu'ayqib. Here, Mu'ayqib is mentioned by name, but Mu'ayqib is the servant of Uthman during the caliphate of Uthman. It fell from Mu'ayqib's hand into the well of Aris. Another hadith by Ja'far ibn Muhammad عن أبيه كان الحسن والحسين يتختمان في يسارهما. Hassan and Hussein would wear the rings in the left hand. رضي الله عنهما. And أنه كان يتختم في يمينه. But the Prophet Muhammad would wear it in the right hand. And so Hassan and Hussein, these are two great companions of the Prophet Muhammad, people from his Ahlul Bayt, and there's no one more knowledgeable than Hassan and Hussein. And if they wore their ring on their left hand, and that means that they didn't see that as a important sunnah to necessarily have it on the right hand. اتخذ رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خاتما من ذهب فكان يلبسه في يمينه فاتخذ الناس خواتيم من ذهب. In this other hadith, and this is narrated by Nafi' from Ibn Umar, that the Prophet Muhammad one time had a golden ring, a ring made of gold, right? And again, he wouldn't wear this ring for fashion statement purposes. It was simply for the purpose of signing a letter. and then he saw other people doing that as well. They were taking golden rings, but they were taking them for fashion purposes. فَطَرَحَهُ. Then the Prophet Muhammad did away with that ring. وَقَالَ لَا أَلْبِسَهُ أَبَدًا فَتَرْحَ النَّاسِ خَوَاتِيمُهُم. He said, I'm never going to wear that golden ring again, because I see that people are taking golden rings for fashion statements. And when people saw the Prophet Muhammad did away with his golden ring, then they did away with their golden rings as well. Of course, there's a prohibition for men wearing gold, like as a fashion statement, right? But not using it for like a purpose. The next chapter is Bab ma ja'a fi siffati sayfi Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. How was the sword of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? And it's 7 o'clock, so maybe we'll just end on this chapter. This hadith is from Anas, where he says, كان قبيعة سيف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من فضة. The handle, the top part of the handle of the sword of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was from silver. Just stop for a moment and think that how the fact that the Prophet Muhammad had a sword, right? I mean, this is someone who was fighting amongst his companions. This is not someone who was a king sitting in a tent, telling people what to do. This is someone who was, in the trenches with his companions, walking, talking the talk, but also walking the walk. كان قبيعة سيف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من فضة. The handle of the sword of the Prophet Muhammad was from silver. And this other hadith from Abdullah مكة يوم الفتح وعلى سيفه ذهب وفضة. قال طالب فسألته عن الفضة فقال كان قبيعة سيفي فضة. He came into Mecca, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his sword had components of silver and gold in them, right? And that is, that was from his sword. وزعم سمرة أنه صنع سيفه على سيف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وكان حنفيا. And Sumrat ibn Jundub claimed that his sword was like the sword of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it was made according to the makings of Hanafiya. Banu Hanafiya was a tribe on the outskirts of Mecca, and they were a tribe that were well known for two things. One, they were well known for their swordsmanship, like their craftsmanship of swords. This is a tribe that was very good in making swords, right? And this hadith is saying that the sword of the Prophet Muhammad was similar to the way that the Banu Hanafiya would make their swords. Also, the Banu Hanafiya, this is the tribe that Musaylima al-Kadhab, right, came out of. So Musaylima al-Kadhab, the false prophet that emerged and claimed that he was a prophet as well, he came from the tribe of Banu Hanafiya. So that's all the time that we have to cover today. We're going to pause here. We can continue after Ramadan. I'll talk to Abdullah and see kind of like what the situation is schedule-wise. But, we've covered approximately a third of the book. And it's not too difficult to finish the whole thing. So we'll see. If people want to finish it after Ramadan, we'll see what they prefer, and if they do, then I can make time for that. But we'll stop here for today. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله فاستغفروه إنه كان غفارا. جزاكم الله خيرا. Won't see you again for the rest of Ramadan, but inshallah everyone has a blessed Eid and a Ramadan that is accepted from them, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.